Welcome to the HTML and CSS Basics module. This module contains 3 different sections. First, you're going to go through an HTML crash course, then a CSS crash course, and then finally, you're going to tackle a bunch of HTML and CSS challenges. And throughout this entire module, you'll be working with projects, so it's super practical. Starting out, you're going to work on a landing page for a mission to the moon. Super cool. And then you'll move on and build this lizards page through a bunch of HTML and CSS challenges. The teacher is the epic Kevin Powell. He's a CSS guru who at the time of recording this screencast has over 300,000 fans on his YouTube channel and a bunch of experience as an in-person web development teacher. So you are in very good hands. But before you meet Kevin, there's one thing I want you to do. Click this image right here, which will take you to the Today I Will channel on Discord. That is a channel that helps you stay accountable. If you simply post your plan for today, basically announcing to the community what you are planning to do, you will feel a greater obligation to actually do it. And you will also get a bunch of emojis from the community who are cheering from you from the sidelines. So this is something I want you to get into the habit of doing. Every time you start coding on Scrimba, or wherever basically, you can head over to this channel, post your plan, and thus increase the chance that you actually pull it off. So just click this image right here, and you will be taken to the Today I Will channel. And once you've done that, let's get started on the HTML and CSS Basics module.
I'm very excited to introduce you to the HTML and CSS crash course, and I will be your teacher through this, and my name is Kevin. A little bit of background on me really quickly. I was actually a print designer for several years, and then I was also freelancing along on the side of that, and with the freelancing, I did a lot of web design as well as web development. And then in 2014, I got hired as a teacher where I worked in the classroom for 6 years. In 2016, I also started teaching online where I have a YouTube channel with over 175,000 subscribers, and I also have several online classes, including a lot of content here on Scrimba. So this course is about HTML and CSS, and you might be wondering what the deal is with them. What are those? And HTML and CSS are 2 different languages, so they will be 2 different things that we have to learn, but they're all about putting the content on the page and making the page actually look good. So to take a quick look at what these actually are, I just want to show you a really quick look here. This is HTML that we're looking at on the screen right now. We're going to be learning what all of this means, and you'll easily be able to understand what all of this is once we are done with this. And over here, you can see this is CSS. And as you might notice, they look very different from one another, and they are completely different languages, but they have a very close-knit relationship. And what all this code here is doing between these 3 different files is it's making this page right here. And this is the page that we're going to be looking at building out through this crash course. So we can go through here. You can see that we have some links here. So if I click on that, it will bring us to the other page. We can see that. And then I can go back with this link here and come back over to here. So all of the code that we see there, it's what's placing all the content on the page and making it look the way it looks. So HTML is the language that is controlling the content, and that is why if you look at the files on the side there are 2 HTML files, one for each page. So they are what are placing the content on the page. And not only are they placing content there, but they're actually telling the browser and the user what that content is. And CSS, well, if no one has CSS, no one will stick around. And what I mean by that is, let's take a quick look, is if I come in and delete all the CSS that I have on here, the page that we had that looked pretty good now looks, well, pretty boring. We still have our images, which are pretty, but other than that, we have a very boring looking site. So the CSS is really controlling what the content looks like. So that is the big difference between the 2 of them and why they have such a close-knit relationship. One is what the content is, and the other one is what the content looks like. And not only is it what the content looks like, but we're doing things like controlling the layout, we're doing animations, and doing much, much more. CSS is a very fun language once you start learning it. Now, as far as this course itself, we're going to be looking at the fundamentals of both HTML and CSS, and we're going to be splitting them apart. We're going to start by focusing on HTML. So we're going to be looking at how we can place the content on our page, but also how we have to organize our content to be able to get it to render properly. And then after that, we're going to do a second part to this course, which is going to be focused more on the CSS side of things. Now, this course is here on Scrimba, which is an amazing interactive platform, and we want to take advantage of that as much as possible. So we're going to be getting you to write as much code as we can along the way, including challenges to keep you going and challenges that are going to push you beyond what we learn in this class as well. Now, one thing is, this is a crash course, so we're not learning everything there is to learn. We're learning enough to get you started and get you going and get you excited by all of this that we have here. And there'll be a lot more information on both HTML, CSS, and other languages like JavaScript as you progress through the rest of the bootcamp. So that's enough talk. Let's go and start learning a little bit about HTML and getting you to start writing some code. So let's dive into HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and as we've already mentioned, it is the content of websites, and for the most part, it is pretty straightforward. As a markup language, it means we're describing what the different pieces of content on the page are, and the term hypertext means that there's links. That's the original meaning behind that. So it was, instead of just being a markup language, like you might even know the language markup, in this case, we have the ability to add links and make pages link together or jump to different locations within a page. So that is the hypertext part of HTML. And when I say that we're telling the browser what the content actually is, what I mean by this is it a heading or is it a regular paragraph? Or maybe it's a link, or the text should be bold, or it should be italic. So these are all things like, say you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can highlight some text and hit a little command on the GUI and it will make the text bold or italic or turn it into a heading. And so all of these things are, we can select and do that. When we're creating websites, we can't do it through a GUI. We have to be telling the browser what it is through code. On top of that, there's a little bit more, so we can say what different parts of our web page are. So we can actually say there's different sections, and we can say that there's a navigation, or that this is the footer, or this is the main content. And there are many other parts of the website that we can describe and tell the browser what that part of the website actually is. So just really quickly, if we come and take a look at the code here, we're doing this and we're telling the browser what everything is through these guys right here and that right there. So anything that's in these little triangle brackets is what's telling the browser what something is. So you can see that there's already a lot of content that is already here and on the page, and it's all showing up here in this page right there. And we're telling the browser what these different pieces of content are like this. And this is exactly like you would do if you were in Word, where you would select something and hit bold. That's what's happening here with this strong tag. That's what's happening here where we're saying it's strong. This text here is becoming bold because the browser knows that this is what we want it to do. And when you're first looking at all of this, sometimes it can seem a little bit confusing. So let's just dive into a little bit of what tags are and how tags work. And then we're going to get you actually making some adjustments to the content here. So whenever we have different things on the page, we call those HTML elements. So these tags, those tags we were just looking at, these are different elements that are going on the page, and most elements have an opening and a closing tag. So the opening tag, we're saying this is the start of my heading, and then this is the end of my heading. And we're showing the closing tag by having a / inside the triangle brackets. So I'm opening my heading, I put my content, and then I close my heading here. If you don't close a heading, well, all sorts of crazy stuff can happen. So what I want you to do is I'm going to have you make a little change here. Now, when in Scrimba, when we make a change to the HTML, what you're going to want to do is click over on this to bring this back open, and then just hit the little refresh button so you can actually see that change come into effect. Or you can also just save the file. So a Control S, or if you're on a Mac, a Command S will save the file, and then that should update the page automatically as well. So what I want you to do is come and delete this closing H1 tag. Remember, this is telling my heading that it's starting here, and this is telling my heading that it's ending over here. And what I want you to do is think about what will happen when I delete that. Take a guess, like come and take a look at this and go, when I delete this closing tag, I think this is going to happen, and then see if that is actually what happens. And then when you're done with that, I'm going to take a look and we'll sort of explore it a little bit. And I have one more thing that I'm going to want you to do before we jump into the next lesson. All right, so some text got really big there, right? It just exploded a little bit. So let's go and delete that. And let's go and take a look. So I'm going to hit refresh here on my page. And oh my goodness, that's a lot of really big text. Huh, wow. Oh my goodness, everything. Wow. That's not, I wonder, that's kind of crazy, right? And basically what's happened is we've have an opening H1, But then we have all this content that is going all the way down to here, which is getting stuck inside that H1. So it's all becoming gigantic pretty much. And we're saying this is all my main heading. So what I'd like you to do now is to come and close that H1 again to fix the problem that we've just created. I'm just going to pause for a second now so you can go ahead and do that. And then when you're ready, hit play again, and we'll take a look at the next thing that I want you to take a look at. Awesome. So if I come in, let's go and do that myself. Close H1. And remember, the forward slash here is really important, and this is what's telling it that it's closing. So if I come and I refresh here, we can see that it fixes it. Now, if I didn't include that forward slash there and we just had it as an H1, when I'd go and take a look, everything is still really, really big. So this is basically saying this is an H1, and then I'm also starting another H1 right here. So we really need to have that forward slash there. So we have close, and then everything falls into place and everything starts going back to normal. So we have my opening tag and my closing tag right there. Now, another thing you might notice is not only do we have these little guys here, but in some of them we have something like class is equal to, or even src is equal to, and there's quotation marks, and it looks a little bit more complicated. These are called attributes. So we're going to be talking about attributes a little bit later on, just so you know if you're looking at it now, they do tend to make things look more complicated than they actually are. So if you're looking at this and you see all of those everywhere, don't stress too much about it. They're actually really simple to understand what they're doing. And we're going to be getting around to those, as I said, in a few lessons from now. In the meantime, if you want to come in here and just start making changes and playing with it and deleting things and seeing what would happen, or playing with the content that's in here, I really would encourage you to do that before you move into the next lesson. All right, so before we jump into the lessons and start learning what all of this means, I wouldn't mind you just trying to make some changes in here and seeing how when you make the changes, how you can see those in the editor and get used to the Scrimba interface a little bit along the way. So you will notice on the side, there are two HTML files. So those are the content themselves, but for now, let's stick in the index.html. And if I click on the window here, I can actually see the website that this is building right here. So if I come in, and let's just stay here at the top, Moonbase Alpha. If I come in here and I can change that to Moonbase Beta, and I'm going to push a Command S for save. And when I do that, you can see that now it says Moonbase Beta. Another way you can do the same thing is to switch this to back to Moonbase Alpha, and then to come over here and just to push refresh, and it will also update it that way. So whichever way you would prefer to work, that works perfectly fine. And while we don't know what all the code here means yet, you can definitely see the content in here already. And so anything that's yellow or blue, that's part of the HTML, but anything that's white, that's regular text. So why don't you go in here and try and make some changes, play around with it a little bit, then save that or refresh your page and just see those changes coming into effect. So to do that, just pause the video and jump in there. And then after you've played with it a little bit, hit play, because after that, we're going to look at how you can make some visual changes as well. Awesome. So I think it's always fun when you can see those things happening as soon as you make the change. And that is one of the reasons why the Scrimba editor is so awesome. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to the CSS file. And the CSS is what's controlling the way things look here. And there's a lot of stuff in here that might look very confusing right now. That's perfectly fine. But one area where I think you can make a quick change is here on the body. And we have a color here, and the color is the actual color of the text. And right now it is set to FFF, but if you want, you can put in actual colors here. I can put red, and actually by writing that, as soon as I do it, I can see the change here. And if ever you don't see it, once again, you can hit refresh, and the change comes in. So I'm going to put that back to FFF, which is another way of writing white. And you can play around, maybe change a color, or this is a background here color. That's not going to change this top area here, but it will change some other things down here. So I really, maybe try and change a font size and see what that does, or change the color, or just play around with things a little bit in here, just to see what happens if you make the line height 4, or if you make the line height 0.5, and keep maybe the units that you see if you see a pixels or something like that. But there's a few things in here you can change and see the effect that's going to happen right away. And just play around with it a little bit. Maybe some of the changes will have no effect at all, and other changes will have an effect. And you can sort of start seeing this connection between how the HTML is putting the content on the page, and then you can also see how the CSS is changing how the content looks. Again, break whatever you want in here, have some fun with it. If it all falls apart, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be learning all about this, starting with the HTML in the next lesson. So in the last lesson, we saw that if we delete this, that it sort of breaks everything. And to explain it a little bit, one way I like to look at this is that HTML elements are a little bit like a book. A book has a front cover and a back cover, and then inside that you have individual pages, and each page has things like titles, subheadings, paragraph, images, and all of those. So if you looked at HTML like a book, you would have an opening cover and then your closing cover at the end. So your front cover and your back cover. So that would be my cover element. And my cover element is made up of the opening and closing tag. Remember, the closing tag has the / to say that it is a closing tag and that we're not opening a second cover. Now, inside of my cover, I would have a whole bunch of pages. And you can't have a page within a page, right? That doesn't really make sense. So whenever you have a page, you have to close one page before you can open the next page, and then so forth and so on, just like that. And then if we zoom in even more, we can look at inside a page, we might have something like a heading. And your heading can't, your subheading can't be inside your heading. It has to be something separated from it. So we have my heading that has a closing heading, and then we can open my subheading, and then we can close my subheading, and then we can have a regular paragraph, and then close my regular paragraph. And once all of that content for that page is done, we can close that page and move on to another one. So if we come and continue looking at this page that we were working on, something that's really interesting here also with closing tags and opening tags is they're really important for declaring what the content is. Because if I come and add a bunch of white space here, and I take a look at this, and let's just space things out, I'm gonna hit save, and you're gonna see here, I have one big chunk of text right there. But if I come and look here, one piece of that text is right here, and the other piece of text is actually right here. Let's go take a look again. You can see that this part here, starting at the word A, so all of this text here is actually coming from this here. But they're stuck together in my layout, but they're not stuck together when I'm looking at it here. And that's because we're not telling the browser what this content is. We're just putting content on the page. And I could come in and I could add more content and put as many, as much as I want, a whole bunch of enters there, as much white space as I want. And you can see it's just stringing it along here after that word avenues. So I have the word avenues, and then I just get all of this text coming right after it. So if you're just putting content on there, it's really not doing anything whatsoever, and the white space is completely ignored. With HTML and CSS, we're using white space to organize and make it easy for us to read, but it really has no impact on the browser and the way the browser renders it. And what we want to do is we actually want to break this up into two separate paragraphs. I'd like this one here to be one paragraph at the top and then a second paragraph down here after that. Now, if you want, you can explore this a little bit and see if you can figure out what the opening and closing tags you need for paragraphs are. Or if you want, you can go back to the slides and check there, because the one where I looked at creating the book, the paragraph is the only real element that I included in there. So if you want an extra hint, you can go look at that. But you can look through the content here, explore it a little bit, see if you can figure out what different things might be. So I think you could probably figure out what a paragraph is. So then we're going to wrap this one in one, and we want to make sure this is also a paragraph right here. So I'll pause for a little bit as you try that out. Make sure you hit save or come back over here and refresh to see if it worked. And then I'll come back in a few seconds and show you the solution. Awesome. So I hope you got that working. So to do that, I'm going to come right here and do the opening triangle bracket, put the letter P, and then put a closing triangle bracket. And then we'll come back over here. You can think, it's the less than close P greater than symbol. And that is my opening paragraph tag and then my closing paragraph tag there. And then I'd want to do the same thing over here. So we have an opening paragraph, and then I can come all the way over to here and put a closing paragraph. And we can hit save. Now you can see I have one coming here and then a second paragraph underneath before we get to my list that has appeared right there. So that is awesome. In the next video, we are going to keep on exploring the basics of HTML a little bit and start really understanding what all of these different tags are for. So every HTML document that we create has a basic document structure that we have to follow. And this is broken up into a few different pieces, but there's a few that I'm going to look at before we even jump into that. The first thing is at the very top of our document, we'll have a doc type HTML. This might seem a little bit strange because it's an HTML file already, and we can see that because I have my mission.html, so the file extension is an HTML document. But this is telling the browser that it is going to be seeing HTML. And this is actually kind of important because there's many different versions of HTML. We're up to HTML5 right now, but we've had many versions in the past. And this is actually telling it which version of HTML that it's looking at. And you might be going, well, I don't see a version there. And that's because with HTML5, they simplified it for us. This used to be this really long and complicated doc type that we used to have to write out. And then with the advent of HTML5, they simplified it, and we won't be progressing to an HTML6 or 7 or 8. It's always just going to be updated versions of 5 as they add new things to it. So that makes it very easy. We just say doc type HTML, and then the browser knows that it's an HTML5 document. The next thing after that is we do need an HTML element. So we have an HTML here, and this lang equals en is saying the language of this document is English. You could leave that off, but it's usually a good idea to include the language on your HTML element. And you can see the HTML element is here at the start, and then all the way down at the bottom, we have a closing HTML element right there. So all of the text is wrapped in that. And once again, this seems a little bit redundant because usually if you have an HTML file, of course we're writing HTML, but this is telling the browser once again that we're starting to write our HTML here, and then our HTML is finishing all the way down over here. We don't want to have things that are hanging out over here because, what would this be doing over here? So we don't have things that hang out over there. We keep everything within that big HTML from the very beginning all the way down to the very end. Then after that, we have a couple of very important things. We have sort of two sections of content. We have our head and we have our body. The head is a really important thing, but interestingly enough, the head is something that no user really sees. Think of it as the metadata of your site. So it's when someone visits your page, they're not seeing the information that's in there. They're just seeing, this is just information that helps the browser know it's there. It could be also useful for social media. It could be connecting your site to different things. And it's all the extra information. And one of the things that we do include in there is something like our title. So we have our doc type HTML, we have our HTML element wrapping it, then we have our head, and then we'll have a title. And the title of the page is actually not visible on your page itself, but where that title does show up is the tab. So if you're watching this in a browser, you can look up at the tab that you're in and you'll see some text up there, and that is the title of the document that you're on. And every tab, you'll see some information there, and that's where the title is. This is also what you see when you Google something. You see the search results that come in, they're showing you the title of the pages most of the time. So if we go and look at our document that we have, you can see there's other things in here. So this is clearly some metadata. This is the car set, which is just saying what type of character encoding we have. This is some metadata that helps make our sites responsive. And these are things we'll get into a little bit more as we progress through the course. This is links to Google Fonts. So this is something else that we'll be talking about later, but it's what's allowing us to use different fonts than the system defaults. And then down here, we have a link to our CSS file. So these are all things that are going on behind the scenes. The user doesn't see these, the user doesn't interact with them. It's just helping our site be what it is. But you might notice we don't have a title, but there's a nice big empty space right here. So what I'd like you to do is hit pause and go in here and add a title to the site. Make sure you have your opening and closing tags to make your title element and put a title in there. But one thing that is very important is because we are using Scrimba, when you save that, you will not see any tabs. We don't have that. So it will not be something that shows up on your page when you make that change. But despite that, I still want you to go in there and add a title in there. Awesome. So I hope you had a good title that you chose, but I'm going to go through and add one in here myself. So I'm going to do title. And whenever I'm writing HTML, I always close things before I go in and actually write what I put inside here. Or maybe not every single time, but I try to do that every time. By doing that, you're making sure that you're not forgetting to close an element, which is always really, really important to do. So I have my open title and close title, and then I can write Moonbase Alpha. And just like that, we have a title on my page. And I wanted to show this to you because there's no way to verify that we did it properly. So as long as you had something like that, and if you put our mission or anything else in there, that's perfectly fine. But as you can see, if I do hit save and I go look, you don't see that title anywhere. This Moonbase Alpha, our mission, that's coming from my H1 here. This is invisible, but super, super important to have on your pages. And up next, we're going to look at the body and the type of things we have in our body. And then we're going to start getting you writing some of this from scratch instead of just modifying an existing page. So when we looked at the document structure, we saw the head is for putting in the metadata, and then we have the body, which is the content itself. So how do we actually control and add our content in there? And so one thing that's important to understand is there's sort of two types of elements. Some elements define the content itself, and some elements are used more to organize our content. And we're going to be starting with a lot more of a look at defining the content. And then as we progress through the course, we're going to start adding in a few that we use to organize our content. As far as defining content comes, this is like defining things like headings, paragraphs, and lists. If you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you can choose if something is a heading or if it's, they have different headings that you can choose from, and that will have different impacts on what it looks like. We have our paragraphs. You have bullet lists that you can turn on in Google Docs and in Microsoft Word, or you have numbered lists. So we have all of those same features in HTML, except instead of using a little toggle switch, we have to write the code to do the exact same thing. Headings are one of the most important parts of your document, and what a lot of people don't realize is they're actually a big part of defining the document structure itself. And so really, when you're writing your headings, you want to think of it like a table of contents. We have 6 levels that we can choose from. We have an H1 through to H6. So there's an H2, H3, H4, H5, and there's nothing beyond that. So you can't use an H7, H8, H9. That doesn't mean anything. And whenever we're using our HTML elements, we do have a set list of elements that we can choose from. This is a table of contents, and it gives you a bit of an idea here of how this works, where you have a table of contents. This is the title. This is the H1. This is what is happening here. And then over here, you have these H2s, where it's sort of these big sections. So I'm saying H2 here, and then we have these little subsections that are coming in. So these are like H3s, and then I have H4s over here. So whenever you're using an H2, it's defining a new section of your document, and then an H3 is a subsection under that H2. So in general, you will not be skipping heading levels. And one thing that's very important is the H1 is the heading for that page, meaning you can't have 6 H1s on a page. You will have one H1 on your entire page. And if we go and look in our code here, we can actually see that we have my H1 right here at the top, which is defining what this is. This page is called Moonbase Alpha, our mission. So if you want, you can go ahead and change that, or you can even, if you want, change what this looks like. You'll see that it actually will have a visual change, 2 things going on here, but we have some CSS controlling stuff too. So we have my H1 right there that's doing that. And then if we go further down in this code, you can find an H2 here. So this is the H2 for a new section of content. So H2, going to the moon, an important step for humanity. So here's sort of my title, my introduction, and then we get to here, and this is a new section of content that we got to. You can see that it is very broken, but that's okay. We're going to fix that very, very soon. We're going to be doing that in this lesson. But just to show you, we've gotten to a new section of content, and so this is sort of a subsection of our main page. That's the idea with my H2 right there. Now, as far as paragraphs go, these are your P tags, and these are just the regular text of your document. But unlike headings, they're not numbered. You don't have a P1, a P2, a P3. If you do need to change what one of them looks like compared to other ones, there's other ways of doing it than numbering them. So just it's a P is a P is a P. So if we go and look at my text, we can say I have a P here, we have another one there, we have another one here. We have a whole bunch of paragraphs everywhere, and you just keep repeating the P anytime you need it. So what I want you to do is take this knowledge and put it into action. So what I've done is, you can see here there's a comment, and this is an HTML comment. We'll talk about those a little bit more later on. But as I said, I broke the website a little bit here, and by adding our content in here, you'll be able to fix it. And so here is, if we go into my text, we have the text that you can copy and paste in. And I'm going to let you know that these 2 should be headings and these should be paragraphs right here. And there's a little bit of a hint in that if you look in here, we already have this area organized. So we have an H2 here. And then if we look here, this is another heading, but it's sort of a subsection or a subcategory, or however you want to see it, of this area. So this is a lower down heading level. And then we have a regular paragraph that comes after that. So you can come and take this first bit of text here and put that one right here. And then that next bit of text, you can come and put it there. Once you've done that and you hit save, everything should seem balanced out, and it should fix the layout problem that we've run into here. So that will be a nice little step. So it is sort of give you confirmation that you did it properly. And then I'm going to be quiet for a little bit so you can hit pause and do that. And then when you're done, you can hit play again and then watch me do it so you can verify if you had it right. Awesome. So let's go and grab this, and then I hope everything worked out there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to paste it in. And this here is going to be, I'm going to look up to here where I had this H3 right there. And I'm going to take this same thing here, and we're going to give this an H3. And remember, I said that This is we have my H2 here, which is creating a new sort of section of content. And then we were going down a level and so this H3 sort of defines this new little description that we have here. And then we have another little subsection, almost like a chapter, right, in our books, but it's like a subsection of that chapter or of the textbook or something like that. Now I've opened my H3 here. Remember what happens if you forget to close a tag? It causes all sorts of chaos. So I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to do a closing H3 by putting the / and then close H3 just like that. And I can come over to here and I can do my opening paragraph and come all the way over to the end and I can close the paragraph. Now the spacing, I'm going to make that lowercase. The spacing of things here is a little bit off. You can see the indentation. We do use indentation. It's not important for the browser, just like if we came through here. Remember we looked at how white space does nothing or empty space does nothing. So if you want to indent things, what you can do is select, you can put your cursor right at the beginning of where you want, or you can just select the whole element itself. And you can push tab on your keyboard. And you just keep pushing tab until it reaches where you want it to, so it's all even. And we're going to talk more about this a little bit later on as well, though. So we can come through and do the same thing for the next one. I'll go a bit quicker this time and copy all of that. Go to my HTML, paste it all in. Let's start by tabbing this over. And we can put my H3, and I can close my H3. And then we can come over to this one here and put a paragraph. And then I can close my paragraph and we can go take a look, and just like magic, everything has come in and it is all working properly. We have 3 columns. Again, they're not all squished. They're not all perfectly equal. We're going to see how we can actually get these columns and all of that working by the end of the CSS section of the crash course. But for now, really good job in just getting those headings in there. Let's keep on going and let's get you writing a little bit more code. So really good job with that. And now let's keep on going. And I'm going to get you to start seeing if you remember what we've looked at so far. All right, it is challenge time, and I'm going to be challenging you now to do a whole bunch of stuff on your own. One thing I am going to be providing you is some hints, and to be able to do those hints, I've created some slides here. So if you click on the slide, it will open, and you can see the first hint right there. And then when you're on this, you can use your arrow keys to navigate around, and when you use your arrow keys, you will go between different slides. So the first one has this hint right here to show you how to start off a new document, and then you can cycle through a few others to get a few more hints along the way if you feel like you need them. But of course, we already have this page here as well. So if you want to, you can come and reference this, because this challenge, you're going to be doing your own page. And, it's the first time you're really starting from scratch. When you have a blank file, that can be very anxiety inducing. So remember, we have this, we have the hints you can refer back to, or you have your own notes if you've been writing your own notes. And the one thing we don't know how to actually do at this stage is how to create a new file in Scrimba. And it's actually really easy. You just have to move your mouse over to where all the files are, and you should see 3 dots come up. So when you click on that, you'll see an option for a new file. And what I want you to do, the very first thing, is going to be click on that new file and call it index.html. I'll explain why it's index in a second, but I want you to go and make that file just so you can see in Scrimba and practice in Scrimba making a new file. And I'll see you in a couple of seconds. Awesome. So nice and easy, right? That was a nice quick win, not much of a challenge yet. And I'm going to do that now as well, index.html, and click OK, and I can see it right here. And the reason I went with index.html is the index is the root or the main file for any website. So when you go to scrimba.com, you're finding their index file. So whenever you go to like the home page of a site, it's always the index file that you're landing on. And this is where we're now looking at this blank file, and I want you to get started with it and create the basic document structure. You already saw the first hint, so you can do that one there. You don't have to start adding content yet. Right now, I just want the basic structure so we can start adding content to it. Do as much as you can remember, or reference back to the hints, or reference back to that mission.html so you have a few things to look at. And then I'll come back in and I'll take a look at it with you. All right, so the first thing we need is that first hint that we already saw, which is the doc type HTML, just like that. And then after that, it always seems a little silly. We've told it it's an HTML file, but we do need to come in and open and close our HTML element like that. And there we go. So we have opening and closing of my HTML. And then inside of there, we need 2 more things. So the first one that we need to have in there is our head. and I will close my head right away. And I like closing elements right away as much as possible, just because sometimes you forget to close it if you don't do it right away. And then we have our body, and we can close our body. Great. So there we have it, the basic structure of an HTML document. Nothing too complicated, a lot simpler than the other one we were looking at. And then we can come in here and you can start writing some code. Before that, we want to be able to see our file. So what I'm actually going to do is in here, you're not going to see it, I don't think, but if I come up where it says mission.html, if I change that to index.html and I hit return, I'm actually on that page. So if I come on here and I add a P for a paragraph and I say, hello, world, and I close that paragraph. And now you can see there's my hello world right there. So any changes I make now, I can see right here. So what I want you to do is I want you to add at least a title up here in the head. It can be whatever title you want to give it. I'm going to leave that one completely up to you for now. And then I want you to come into the body and add at least one heading and 2 or 3 paragraphs. It could be about what you've learned so far. It could be about yourself. It could be about anything whatsoever, but I want you to get used to adding content to a page. If there's something you're not too sure about, you can reference back to the existing page. Maybe you could even go to the mission page and grab an image and paste it back in over on this side, something like that. See if you can get that to work as well. So a title over here, and then a heading and a few paragraphs right here. I'm not going to come up with a solution for this one. I think you can do it all on your own. And then we're going to keep going with some more HTML once you're done with that. So I hope you had some fun writing a little bit of HTML along the way. Now we're going to be looking at upping our game a little bit by looking at inline elements, which also introduces us to the idea of what an inline element is, and that there's also something called the block elements as well, or block level elements. So all elements by default are either a display block or a display of inline. And this has big implications on how they render on the page. There are other display types, but those are going to come up when we start learning more about CSS. But by default, we have inline and we have block. Block level elements you already know and you've already been using. Everything we've done so far pretty much has been a block level element. So what a block level element is something like a heading or a paragraph. And do you remember when we originally set this up and we didn't have any P's around these, and then I had you add them and it broke that up into 2? What a block level element will do is it will stack one on top of each other. So even though this line is really short and there's empty space on the side of it, it still stacks, this still stacks underneath it and doesn't go up over here. That is how block level elements, think of them like Lego blocks. Lego blocks, they stack one on top of each other and they sort of click one on top of each other. So a block level element will always do that. But we have another type of element, which is our inline elements. And inline elements behave sort of like their name implies. Instead of stacking one on top of each other, they go in line with whatever is around them. And common inline elements would be links, which we're going to be getting to shortly, and the M and strong elements. Now, strong is the first one we're going to look at, and by default, it makes text bold, but don't use it for making text bold. Use it to add importance to the text. And notice how I changed my tone a little bit there when I read it. I bolded this on purpose to show you a little bit on how bold should be used. It should be used for adding importance to something. So it's very important that we don't use it for making text bold. That is the most important part of all of this. It is really about how important that is and not about the default styling that comes with it. So it is something that's kind of weird with HTML, but it is a really important thing to know about it. And as we progress more through HTML, you're going to learn that we have what's called semantic HTML. And we've already touched on that with our headings. It's telling it, we're structuring our document. Paragraphs or paragraph text. As you learn more about HTML, you're going to hear the word semantic come up a lot. If you hear that, it just means that that element has meaning. It's not just visually changing something, it's literally giving that element some meaning. So the strong element is not only making things bold, which it does, but it is adding importance to that text. And so if we come and look, we can already see some text here that has a strong wrapped around it. We have another strong over here. So if we go and scroll all the way down here, you'll notice, and that is let's just refresh here. That is our text that's coming right here. And there is some bold text there as well. That's our strong. So what I want you to do is see if you can find some text in these two paragraphs that you think would be more important than anything else, and add the strong and closing strong tags to those to make those a little bit more important. And by doing that, it will also make it bold when we look at it in the website itself. So to me, if we look at this, I think the most important text here would be strong. We can open it there. And the strong could be as short or as long as you want it to. You could do one word, or I'm going to bring it all the way up to here and close strong, just like that. And then we can come on to the second one here. And I'm going to say from here, strong, totally different from anything we've ever explored before. Seems pretty important to me. Close strong, just like that. And just like everything else, it's the same element at the beginning, the end, and we just have to indicate that it's closing. We are putting my / in there right there. I can hit save, and we can see that it is working. And one way you can know that if you made a mistake with your closing tag or something like that, if we forgot the closing tag, you can see just everything after that has become bold. So it's one of these ones, these visual changes sometimes do make it quite easy to see when we have made a mistake along the way, and then we can easily come in and remember to put our closing tag in, or if we have a typo that's in here or something like that along the way. So not only do we have strong, but another element that we do have is our M, and M's add emphasis to text. By default, this will make it italic, but similar to the strong, it is not to be used to make the text italic, but it is to add emphasis to the text. And I added emphasis to when I said not there, and you can see that it is italic. So similarly, this isn't just for a visual italic, it's really meant to add emphasis. And this could be the difference between saying I love you and I love you. You're adding emphasis there, depending on how you say it. So that is and usually if this was written text, the traditional way to show that emphasis is to make it italic. So that is why we have the M tag. So if we go through here and we look, we can copy, you can see a few spots where I have put it in. And if we come and take a look at the site, you can see that we have some italic coming in right there. And what I'm going to do is ask you to take this word important and put some extra emphasis on there using an M element and wrapping it up. And then we'll come back and take a look at it in a second once you've got that working, because there is something important that I want to discuss about how all of this works as well. Great, so I hope you got that working. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to say put an opening M there and make sure I come over here and do my closing M so we can tell it that it does close at one point. And let's hit save on that. And we can come and see that we do have it right here where we have all of this is bold and then the word important happens to be italic because there's extra emphasis being added to it. Now, one thing that's really important here is that my M is opening and closing inside of this strong, and that this strong is opening and closing inside of this paragraph. And the way that we open or close our tags like this is very important. We wouldn't want our M closing outside of the strong or something like that. We're going to discuss this more in the next video. But another thing that's also important with how this is all done is that strong and M here are inline elements. And they're inline because they're not causing new lines of text. Here I have one line of text and part of that is bold and part of that bold text is italic. And that's all happening inline. They're all going one next to each other. That would be different if I came and I broke this whole thing by making this a paragraph instead. Because if I did that and we went to take a look, that important is coming on its own line because this is a block level element, just like paragraphs and headings and a whole bunch of other elements that we will be seeing in the future, which will all be block level elements. Whereas inline elements tend to most commonly be used for styling text and selecting pieces of text inside of something and staying in line and not breaking into new lines along the way. So if you want to go and play around with strong or M in here, go for it, add some new strong and new M's on different parts in here just to make sure you have a good feel for it. And then I will be happy to see you in the next video after that. So when we're writing our HTML, one thing we have to pay a lot of attention to is how things are nested. And what do we mean by nesting? Well, nesting is a lot like Russian dolls when you think about it. And it's that elements need to be either inside or outside of other elements. So, if you know the Russian dolls, these little dolls like this, and you open one up and you put one inside and you can close that, and then you take the next one and you close it on top, and then you take the next one and you close it on top of that, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's the same idea here. You can't take like this little guy, take the head off, and then put the bottom in, and then put the head back on, right? Once the next size up is closed, you can't close something else on top of that. And that's like nesting in HTML. And what I mean by that is we were looking here in the last video how we had a paragraph. Inside my paragraph, I had a strong, and then inside my strong, I had my M. And each one is nested one inside. So here we have a small one that's nested inside a larger element, which is nested inside another element right here. So what's really important here is if we have a paragraph and I open something within that paragraph, I have to close it before my paragraph ends. Just like with the nesting dolls, you have to close one, put it inside, then close the next one, put that inside, close the next one. For example, if I took my ending paragraph tag here, and for some reason I tried to close it here before, and then I'm closing my M, and then I'm closing my strong, well, all sorts of things are going to break. It's actually closing the paragraph there, so it's forcing that onto a new line over here. And this text is saying strong. It's sort of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but it starts breaking the layout a little bit. Now, one thing with nesting is if you make a mistake with it, the browser, when it puts your page together, will try and fix your mistake for you. But sometimes that can also lead to unintended consequences along the way. So what I've done is, if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see there is a nice big comment here. It says fix the mistakes that start here and the mistakes end here. So this is the only area where you'll find any mistakes. I want you to fix all the mistakes about what you see here. There's nesting issues. There's one other issue also. It's all things you've learned about so far. So you can hit pause, fix those mistakes up, and then I'll come in and solve it too, so you can make sure that you got all of them. Awesome. So I'm going to jump in here. And the very first thing you might have noticed is I started with an H3 and I never closed it. And, you could come here and close your H3 there, but that doesn't make much sense. We want this to be on its own to prevent any nesting. We don't want all these other elements to be nested inside our H3. So we'll close that one right there. And then we can focus on this mess of things down here where there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So the first one is we have and this is where you sort of need to come and look, and you see an M and it's closing there. So this one is perfectly fine. But we have a strong, then a paragraph. That's a little bit weird to have an inline element that is outside of a block element. So if you ever see that, that's sort of a word of warning. But let's see, we have open, strong, open paragraph. And then we keep going, and then we get to a close strong. Oh, but that's closing. But so there's a mistake there because we haven't closed our paragraph. If we wanted it nested this way, we would have to close our paragraph here, but that doesn't make much sense. So it makes more sense if I take this opening strong tag and I put it in here. We get all of this looks okay. Oh, and then here too, there's a bit of a mistake. So we can take this M here and move that one over. So we're closing our M before we're closing the strong. So we have an open strong, open M, close M. So we're back in a regular strong, open M, close M, and then we can close that strong. Perfect, we're good. And we're inside this paragraph. So let's just keep on going all the way along. We're in a paragraph. Everything is closed here. Then we get another strong. And then, whoop, my paragraph is closing before my strong is closing. So that doesn't make sense once again. So we're going to take this strong tag and we're going to take it over there and drop it in right there and hit save. And we should be able to go down and take a look. And while we have lots of italic and bold text going on, and from a semantic point of view, I don't think that makes too much sense. But at least from a valid HTML point of view, everything here is working properly now. All right, so it's time to look at links, and to figure out how links work and to be able to use links, we need to first learn about something called attributes. So if we go and look at our document that we have so far, we have lots of attributes that are actually being used here, and we've already looked at some of them. For example, one of the ones I looked at with you earlier was this lang equals en right here, and this is an attribute that is right there. You can see here I have something called a div, which we're going to be exploring in future lessons, but on there we have a class attribute. And down here we have images that have an attribute on them. Now, attributes are optional, so HTML elements can have attributes, but they don't need to have attributes. One thing that's very important about them is that they're always within the opening tag only. So we never have any attributes that are on the closing tag for our element. And the purpose of them is to give the browser extra information about that element. So for example, here we could just have our HTML element, but by adding the lang equals en, we're telling the browser what the language being used in the content is. Or if I come down to this image right here, an image we need to tell the browser where to find the image that we want to place there. So I have this big image that's showing up on my page. I need to tell it where it is. So it's in my images folder. And then inside my images folder, there is the file name that is coming there. So this attribute is telling the browser where to find the image to place on the page. And as you can see, we have lots of class attributes, which is something we'll see a little bit more about later. And there's attributes are super common and they're all over the place. And you can even have custom attributes, which you'll be learning more about once you get to the world of JavaScript. For our purposes, though, we want to focus on links. And links use the A tag, and you might think that's a little bit strange, but it's short for the word anchor. The reason we use the word anchor is you're sort of creating a connection between two different places, sort of like when you drop an anchor. So it's easy to get back to that place where the anchor is. And links can do two different things. A lot of people think of links as, when you click a link, it brings you to another page. But you can also have links that bring you to different parts within a single page as well. Now, one thing that's interesting about links is they're one of the few elements that require an attribute to work. In this case, the attribute is going to tell the browser where the link goes when we click on the link. And if you don't tell it where you want it to go, well, it doesn't actually do anything, right? It's a completely useless element. And it's a little bit like images as well. Images are one of the others that require something to be able to go somewhere else. And we're going to come down and I'm going to create a paragraph. And then here where it says go back to the homepage, I want to turn this into a link that's going to bring us to our index.html file. So the first thing I'm going to do is put an opening A here and a closing A right here. And if I hit save and I go look at my page, you can see it looks like a link now, but it's not actually going to do anything at all. If I click on it, it doesn't go anywhere because the browser doesn't know where we want this to go. So this is where we need to have an attribute. And for attributes to work, as you can see with all these other ones that have attributes on it, we need to put a space, and then it's href is equal to, and then in quotation marks, you tell it where you want it to go. And I'd encourage you to always do the opening and closing quotation marks, and then go back in between them, just so you don't forget your closing quotation mark. And so we're just saying, what's the reference? Where do we want it to go is how you can think about that. And where do we want it to go? Well, this is actually really easy. All you have to do is write in the file name here. So I can come here and I can just write index.html, just like that. And now I'm going to hit save. And if we go and find it, there it is. And if I click on it, it brings me to my index page, which has nothing on here right now. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is on the index page to come inside the body. And if you want, you could come and create a title here in the head. But the most important thing for now is in the body, I want you to make a link that's going to bring us from this page back to the mission.html page. And then when you're done, hit save and test and make sure it works. And if it does work, you should be able to click that link, go to the mission, click the other one, come back to the index, and go back and forth between the two. So I'll be quiet now. I'll let you do that, and I'll wait a few seconds. And then once you're done, you can hit play, and I'll show you my solution. All right, so I hope you got that working. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to put a paragraph, and I'm going to close my paragraph. And if you didn't put it in a paragraph, you would have noticed it still works. So it's perfectly fine. But I do like most of the time keeping my links in paragraphs, though sometimes we won't. And in here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write some text in here. There we go. So are you interested and want to learn more? Click here to learn more about our mission. And I'm going to turn the word click here. Actually, let's just make this entire thing right here our link. So I'm going to start here, A. I'm going to come all the way down over to here, close A, and then inside the first one, remember it's always in the opening, never in the closing tag. I'm going to put a space. I'm going to href for href. 2 quotation marks, and then I'll go back inside. And then inside there, we're going to write in mission.html because I just need to put the file name. And I'm going to hit save on that. So there we go. Are you interested and want to learn more? I can click there, and it brings me to my mission page. And then I can click here, and I can go back to the custom page that we're working on here. So super cool. We got our first link that is working, and this is the building block of the web. If we didn't have links, we wouldn't have the web as we know it today, and you've just made your first 2-page website. And even if this page isn't the most amazing thing in the world, you're making this work, and you should be really proud of the progress that you are making so far. Images, we all like putting images in things. They always look pretty. And just like links, and as I mentioned in the last video, images are one of the few elements that require an attribute to work because we need to tell the browser where it is. And images actually require 2 attributes. There's the src attribute, which is short for source. And there's the alt attribute, which is short for alternative text. I'll often say the src attribute and the alt attribute or alt text. So if ever you hear alt text, it's referring to what would be in the alt tag. So the source tells the browser where the image file is and where it's located so it can load that image in. And the alt attribute provides a description for the image. And this is extremely important for a couple of reasons. One of them is for accessibility reasons. There are many people that have disabilities that also like to use the internet. If they have a visual impairment, they might be using a tool that can read the page to them, and then when it gets to the images, it can read the alt text. If you don't provide any alt text, then it can't read that out loud, and so that person doesn't know what the image is. And if the image is important to the context of the site, that could be a problem. For an image to be considered valid, it does need to have an alt attribute on there. There are times where you'll actually leave your alt blank when it's more of a decorative element than something that's adding to the context of the site, but I don't want to dive too deep down that rabbit hole at the moment, but know that you always need to have an alt attribute on there. Another thing that's really important is the file location of your images. And this is also going to come back to our links as well, because you can have different file paths for links as well as images. Images can be hosted locally within your project, but they can also be from other locations. So you could technically link to an image that's hosted somewhere else on the internet, but this is very much frowned upon and really isn't considered best practice. So just don't do it, even though we're able to. And there's actually some services that will block you from using their images anyway. But we generally do it within our own project. And when they are in our own project, often they'll be in their own folder, like I've done with this project. So if we go and look, we will see that we have an images folder, and you might see img used, you might see images, things like that, where we keep all the images together to keep them organized, because it makes our life much easier if all the images are there instead of just scattered around in our root folder. You'll usually hear the main folder as your root folder. We like keeping all our images in one place to keep it a bit more organized, and you could even have subfolders in there and other things like that. So for this, where I have an images folder, if I want to bring an image in, and you can see I got rid of my image that's at the top of the page, and I'm getting an error because of something that I did, but I've gotten rid of all of the images, and there's some broken images here too. So we're going to be fixing up our images right now. And I'm going to do the first one, and I'm going to let you do the other ones. And so here, after this UL, which this is our list that we have on there, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put in an image, img, and this is another interesting thing, actually, that I didn't mention with the images is there is self-closing tag. So there's no such thing. There's no close image. This is not, if you do this, it doesn't do anything. Images are called replaced elements. So they're self-closing. You might see them also written like this with a / inside the opening element, because it's also the closing element. So if ever you see this is considered a self-closing tag. With HTML5, if it's self-closing, you don't have to put the / I tend not to put it. Some people have a big preference for including it, and some people don't bother. I'm one of the people who doesn't bother, and I just write it like this. So if you remember, we need 2 attributes, the src attribute, so equals double quotation mark, and an alt is equal to, and I'll put my quotation marks. src, I need to tell the browser where it is. I can't just write the file name that I'm looking for. So I know I need to go into my image folder. So to be able to do that, what I'm going to do in my code is I'm going to write img, and then I'm going to do a /, and I need the name of my image, Astro. And I don't want just Astro, it's a JPEG file, so I have to go through and write astro.jpg. I have to do the whole thing like that. And I misspelled alt, let's fix that. And then on my alt tag, looking at the old videos and reading the alt text, you might have said Kevin had a typo in there. There we go, an astronaut standing on the moon. And you'll notice I'm not saying an image of an astronaut standing on the moon. When you're writing your alt text, you don't have to say it's an image of or something like that or a picture of. You just write exactly what you're looking at. So if I hit save, it might not work. I'm still getting an unknown error, but you can see that image has come in now. But you'll also notice if I scroll down, we have some broken images. And one thing I didn't mention about alt text is the alt text actually, if an image is broken and isn't working because either the link wasn't good or the connection was really slow and the image didn't load, it will also put the text of what the image is supposed to be. So that can also be very helpful as well. And another good reason to be including alt text on all of your images. And you'll see here there's a few different things we need to do. Here I need you to insert the missing image, and I put the name of it, the spaceship image, right here. Then this image is broken. It's not working. It's not loading in, but I put the right file name. I wonder why that one's not working. And then down here as well, this one's not working. So I'm going to ask you to go and do that. We're going to put this image in here. Don't forget your alt text. And then you need to fix these two images and make sure that they are loading in. All right, so I hope you got all three of those images going. So I'm going to do an img and do that. And then I'm going to come into src is equal to, and then I'm going to do an alt is equal to. And alt text can be a little bit hard sometimes to come up with a good description. How wordy do you want to get? But you just make sure that you are describing what the image is, and you should be okay. And then I have to look at where it is. So it's in my images folder. So again, img, and then I do a /, and then the name of it is spaceship. And I always need to include the file extension, so JPG. Let's go take a look, and that one is loading in. Fantastic. Look at that, taking off into space, so exciting. So now we can come down and fix this next one here. So this one is because I didn't include the location of it. It was looking for the image over here. It's saying I'm in my index and now I'm looking for Earth from space.jpg. And I can't get to that. Where is it? So I need to have an img / just like that. If I hit save, now you can see that one has loaded in as well. Now, an interesting thing here, just to show you how this does work, is if I take off that img, so my image is broken again, but I go into my images folder and I take that Earth from space. I'm going to drag it. I'm going to drop it just over on my other files. So I'm actually moving it from Scrimba. So it's not in my images folder. It's now in this main area. It's in the root folder, just floating around with all my other files. And now it's still going to work because it's working now because I'm not telling it to look in a folder. I'm saying it lives in the same place as my index.html file. I'm going to take it and put it back in my image folder. That will be broken, so I have to add my image like that, and then we get it back in there. And always keep your images stored away all together instead of just floating around. It's going to make your life much easier. And last but not least, we want to fix this last image right here. So once again, we are missing the img, but if you did that and hit save, it's still broken because we need to have the file type here. So it is a PNG in this case. And I purposely chose PNG just to show you that it's not just JPEGs that we're using on the web. We also have PNGs. You'll also come across SVGs. Of course, you might know GIFs or GIFs, however you want to call them. Those are valid images as well. In general, you wouldn't use a PNG for an image like that. These are usually used if there's transparency involved, but we won't dive too deep into that. But just make sure you're always putting the right file extension when you are putting your images in, or it won't work. Now, two very important HTML elements to learn and understand are our list elements. And we have two different types of lists. We have ordered and unordered lists. So UL is for an unordered lists, and this is your bullet lists by default. And then we have an OL, which is our ordered list, and that creates a numbered list by default. And in both cases, this is just like being in a Google Doc or Microsoft Word when you click the little list and then you can just start writing away and creating a list nice and easily. But there is one extra step that you need to take. You can't just put a OL or a UL because, as we know, when you create empty space in HTML, it just ignores it completely. So we have to define each element within there as well. And we do that with the LI, which stands for list item. Now, the nice thing with this is it doesn't matter if you're inside a UL or inside an OL, it's always a list item. So what I want you to do, I'm not going to give you any help here. I want you to do this one all on your own without seeing me do it. But I want you to come into our file that we have here, and I want you to make an unordered list around this one and make this one into an ordered list. So we need to wrap this in our opening and closing list tags. And then each one of these will be a separate list item. And then the same thing over here, where each one of those will be a list item within the ordered list at the bottom there. And again, up here is an unordered list. See if you can get that working without any help from me whatsoever. And in a few seconds, I'll show you my solution. All right, so I hope you got that working, and let's go and take a look at how we would do it. So here I just have to do an unordered list, so unordered list. And then we want to make sure we have the same thing as our closing element right here, our closing tag, I should say, UL, just like that. And let's do our ordered list down here at the same time, OL. And then we can come over here, and I can do close OL. Let's save and just see what that did. And well, it didn't really do anything. It just gave us a bit of an indent. Same thing over here. You can see that it just created a bit of an indent because it doesn't know what to do with these elements. So that's why we need to have those LIs on there. So I can do an LI open, and then we'll close that LI right here, close LI. And let's hit save and go and look. And now we'll have one bullet point right there, space tourists. But then we have a bunch of stuff that we don't know. And actually, before I even close this, what type of element do you think the LI is? Is this a inline element or a block level element? I'll give you a second to think about it. And it is a block level element. And I know it is because it's living on its own line and it's forcing this other content down onto another line. Remember, if you have an inline element, they all live together and they go one next to each other. If it's a block level element, then nothing can go next to it. It forces a new line of content. So then I can come over to here, and you know what? I'm just going to take this LI here. I'm going to copy that, paste it there, and then I'll take these and paste them in those spots. And now we have a nice little bullet list right there. And we can do the same thing over here with our ordered list. So I already have the closing tag. So let's paste those closing tags in first. And then I'm going to grab this and copy that and paste those in right there. If you're starting to do it, I'm copying and pasting. I've been writing HTML for years. I would really suggest that you write each one out just again to build up that muscle memory of the triangle brackets and the closing tags and doing all of that stuff. And now we can see, once we've done that, we have a nice numbered list, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to keep going as long as you keep going. LI, another list item here, close LI, and just like that, we have a number 4 that is coming in right there. And the one interesting thing before I let you go about lists is while it's useful to be able to make a numbered or a bulleted list, lists are actually used in lots of locations that you wouldn't even realize they're used in. They're going to be an element that you use on almost every page, even if things don't always look like lists. So it's really important. Lists are one of those ones you definitely want to remember, even if you don't think at this point that you'll be using them too often. I guarantee you every page you do will have a list on it. You've learned so much already, but now it's your turn to take what you've learned and put it to the test. So far through this crash course, we have covered a lot of material, and you really need to practice what you've learned. You've done little bits here and there along the way, doing my little challenges that I've been giving you, but I really want you to now take what you've learned and push it. First, I want you to take the content of this mission.html page, and I want you to make this page about whatever you're interested in. This could be about Ferrari's ballet dancing, skiing, skydiving, anything you can think of. You're going to change all the text, change the images. You're going to go through here and change all of the content and make this page about whatever you want it to be about. And then whenever that page is gone and set up, you can create a new index.html page. That is a blank page. It is yours to do whatever you want with. You can play around within there, reinforce everything again. And if you're really up to it and you really want another challenge, create a completely new page from scratch and then go through everything again. And the more times you do this, the more you're reinforcing everything you have learned so far. And the easier everything you do from now on is going to be because you've reinforced these skills so much. Now, one thing I'm going to show you really fast is on this page where you go through and you want to change everything, you probably want your own images in there as well. And all you have to do for that is to open the image folder right here, go on your desktop or on your computer, wherever the images you have are, take them, drag them over, and drop them right in here. And as soon as you do that, it will upload them into here and you can use them. The one thing I would watch out for is try not to put any spaces in the image names. Use hyphenation or underscores instead of spaces, just to prevent any possible problems from coming up along the way with those. The other thing we want to do is, I did mention you want to do an index page. And if we go and look at our index page right now, there's not much here in terms of styling. And if the whole thing looks like that, that could be a little bit boring. So what you could do is you could actually grab these links right here. And this first link here is to our CSS, the one that I had already set up that we haven't dove into yet. But you could go and grab that. And then you could also grab these ones just to grab the fonts. So making sure that we have everything that we need right there. So I'm just going to take that. I'm going to do a Control-C to copy that. Or if you're on a Mac, it'd be a Command-C. And I can come over here and just make sure I'm in the head, and I'm going to paste that in. And as soon as I hit save, you can see the colors have switched over. So if you're bringing in a new H1 or you're bringing in other content, at least we'll have a little bit of styling and it won't look too terrible along the way. And if you're really adventurous and you really want to make it your own, you could even dive into that CSS file and see if you could make a few little tweaks in there and push yourself to learn a little bit more, or see if you can get things working the way you want. But we will be going into the CSS as soon as we're done with all of this. So if you don't feel comfortable with that yet, don't worry about it. But if you want to push yourself and see if you can tinker in there, it's always fun to do that. And I'm actually going to delete this before I leave it to you. So we're back to the blank page to let you do that on your own afterward. You've learned so much already, but now it's your turn to take what you
Hi there, this is Per from Scrimba, and I just want to say congratulations, you are a true superhero. You've completed the HTML crash course, and now it's pretty safe to say that you probably know more HTML than about 98% of the world's population. So you've got some serious superpowers now. And this deserves a celebration. So what I want you to do now is head over to the Today I Did channel in our Discord community. And there, I want you to post a message, something along the lines of this. If you're a little bit lazy, you can just copy paste this message, actually. However, it would be great if you can personalize it a bit. Perhaps share what you found difficult, what you're excited about learning next, how it went, basically whatever you want to tell us. And if you can't think of anything else to share rather than this sentence, well, at least change the emoji. And what you'll see when you post this is that the community will share with you with their emojis. So this is something I actually think you should do every single day after you've completed your coding session. Just head over to the channel and share what you did. Nothing is too small to share. This will help you stay motivated as you progress through the career path, because you'll feel that you have your own personal cheerleader gang standing behind you, cheering for every step you take. So click this image and share your progress, and then I will surely be there to cheer for you.